Dr. Richard Satava and I have known each other for the last 30 years. We met coincidentally at the Medicine Meets Virtual Reality Conference in the late 1990s. I subsequently went to work for Rick at Yale University, Department of Surgery in 2000, and we completed one of the seminal studies in virtual reality simulation training. Rick is a general surgeon. He was seconded into the Defence Advanced Research Projects Agency twice, and he's been associated with or driven some of the major advances in certainly surgical procedures such as surgical robotics. What I've known Rick for or with is virtual reality simulation training. He pioneered virtual reality simulation training when he was in DARPA. And we did the first clinical trial on simulation-based training for the operating room when we worked together at Yale. Rick, you're widely viewed as one of the pioneers in surgical training, surgical devices, and particularly in virtual reality simulation training. You've been at the forefront of an evolution or a revolution in surgery. Would you consider it an evolution or a revolution?
I do believe that the simulation was transposed from the military into the medical profession. We hadn't been using simulation in the same breath that is being used for decades, if not 100 years or more, with the military. And so with the new technologies emerging, I would clearly say that virtual reality and other simulation modes, digital simulation modes, are clearly a revolution. They went from simple cadaver dissections and some online training to the area that we know now as virtual reality surgical simulation.
And have all of your senior colleagues been happy with the surgical simulation that you've driven over the last 30 odd years?
My perception is that the vast majority of them very much like it. They believe that it has significantly improved training methodologies for the discipline of surgery. The problem is the practical application, particularly because of the amount of time it would take, and it takes away from the clinical training of surgeons, both because of scheduling issues, whether it be in the operating room. You can't be in the operating room and in the simulation center at the same time, as well as the length of training that it would take, because the repetitive nature of virtual reality simulation, which gives it its strength by being able to accurately determine as best we can the quality of a surgeon's skill. But this is not something that you can do in a very short period of time or in short sections, if you will. It requires a significant amount of dedicated time, and not all training programs have that type of time allotment available.
And do you agree with that? I mean, okay, I understand there's a service commitment of the resident to the program that they're working in. But do you think the operating room is a good place to acquire the skills that they need to perform the procedure safely?
My personal opinion as a particularly busy surgeon is that no, that's not where you want to be trained. You want to be trained in all of your basic skills, if you will, in an area such as a simulation center, which many of them are now available at particularly at the larger institutions. But you don't have the opportunity in the middle of an operation to stop, discuss an issue, and get the feedback that you need. The immediate feedback, formative feedback, is essential, I think, as a component of the training scenario in order to be able to do a proper assessment of the individual skill.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And that is one of the ideas that I gleaned from you fairly early on after we met, that you basically said for laparoscopic surgery, the operating room was not the place to acquire your basic surgical skills. And the implication was that you needed to take it out of the operating room into surgical skills learning centers. But when you proposed that idea, there was no surgical skills training centers. And that's one of the huge developments that's derived from your approach to acquiring surgical skills. Initially you proposed it around laparoscopic surgery. Do you think your ideas have been disruptive in surgery and further afield?
I do believe that if you approach education in general as a scientific discipline as opposed to a casual environment, I think, yes, it is totally disruptive. It requires specific skills, specific policies that allow time for dedicated skills training. So without question, it's disruptive, just as robotics was as disruptive as laparoscopic surgery was. And we have a couple more of these disruptive revolutions coming in the immediate future.
So why, I mean, you were trained as a traditional general surgeon, laparoscopic surgery came along. Why was it so disruptive?
I believe it was disruptive because of what I had just mentioned about time scheduling, trying to manipulate, if you will, and schedule your timing that you've got available time when you can learn and be taught, get formative feedback, and get appropriate assessment of your skills and learn your errors, how to avoid them, and so forth. This is not something you should be doing in an operating room on a patient. It's totally counter, in my view, to what being a surgeon is all about. Giving your full, dedicated attention to an individual, whether it be in a clinic as you're trying to make a diagnosis and so forth, or in the operating room when you're trying to do a surgical operation. The last thing that you want to do is interrupt a surgeon in the middle of doing an operative procedure.
And back when you were thinking about the idea of laparoscopic surgery, how best to train somebody, maybe that it should be outside the operator, how were your ideas at that time in the 1990s? How were they accepted by the leadership in surgery?
I would say, in general, they were accepted as very disruptive and counter to what is training at that time, but also what is the best for the patient. And so, to a certain extent, there was some evidence that trying to train somebody through virtual reality was counterproductive. But after clinical trials were done and they were able to demonstrate that dedicated time to training and then dedicated full time in an operating room was much better than the way we had been doing it before. The old see one, do one, teach one model, if you will.
Yeah, I mean the VR2R study that we did at Yale, which was the American Surgical Association education paper in 2002, that really was the first time that there was robust scientific evidence that virtual reality simulation training outside the operating room improved interoperative performance of the trainee. I mean, I think that was a seminal moment, and the study is a citation classic. Yeah, I mean, you're the senior author of that study. Um, do those results apply only to surgery, or do you think they have broader implications for other disciplines in medicine?
The methodology of proficiency-based progression clearly can be applied on the full spectrum of any training, particularly skills training of an individual surgeon. Unfortunately, it has not been transitioned to team training. It can be very simply, and I offered a methodology for that, and it was rejected out of hand, thinking, well, no, we don't have the time to do this, and we can't spend so much time trying to train and train as we can with the individual surgeons. But any significant disruptive change is going to be modified after the professionals, the acknowledged experts with many years of their successful clinical practices are going to be asked to change anything. They know what success is. They've been there. They've done that. They've made the mistakes, and they're not making them anymore. And to bring something in new is very, very difficult to change someone who truly is an excellent expert surgeon.
And is that a minor problem or a big problem?
It's always been a big problem. We've had that from open surgery to flexible endoscopy, from flexible endoscopy to laparoscopy, from laparoscopy to robotic surgery, and now from some of the new generations that are coming out beyond robotic surgery, like telesurgery, surgery in space, directed energy surgery. There are a whole host of new opportunities that are going to have to go through this disruptive transition.
And how do we deal with that? I mean, I've been collecting data for 30 years on the effectiveness of a scientific approach to not just surgical training but procedure-based training. And one of my former fellows said to me, "Tony, this is not a problem of evidence. The evidence is there." He said, "This is a problem of you selling it to the establishment." And to be frank, I'm not sure how to do that. Do you have any insights how we should do that?
As I mentioned just a few moments ago, it's an issue of time commitment more than anything else. There are some legitimate objections to the methodology of meeting a specific benchmark repeatedly because it takes so much longer, even though you find out that the result and the skills of the surgeon are better with the proficiency-based methodology. But I would say the practical application of that in a very busy practice, particularly those centers that are trying to train physicians and surgeons, they just don't have the time to do both at the same time. And you don't want to do them at the same time. You want to have dedicated time for each of those.
And I'm not sure that you're aware, but a paper was published fairly recently that demonstrated if you train to proficiency with a proficiency-based progression approach, you train to proficiency in 1/3 of the time that it takes to train somebody with a conventional approach to training. So, I mean, I understand the service commitment, but the bottom line is the institutions have signed up to do training. Surely there should be some prioritization of training and training to a quality assured performance level, because I mean, the implication is it's going to have profound patient safety implications.
I think it's the responsibility of the chairman of the department, whether it be a surgical department, whether it be a radiological department, whether it be whatever department you are the prospective surgeon or radiologist is going to be in, that is going to have to be the problem, if you will, of allocating the amounts of time necessary to be able to do dedicated training. And then when you've demonstrated proficiency, you can go to the operating room. There will be some learning in the operating room, but you won't need to be interfering with the process of a procedure in a patient. So no matter which one you would do, which of the many different disciplines that we have now, we started out with 6 major disciplines in the House of Surgery, and now we're well over 30 or 35 different subspecialties that are out there, and everybody with their own turf and their own requirements, if you will, has made it even more difficult because of the competition amongst the subspecialties for time training and so forth.
Yeah, I agree with you about leadership. I mean, Carlos Pellegrini at UW, I mean, Carlos led and he insisted that the trainees go to the skills lab before they went to the OR. What I mean, do you think is the rate of change of new devices and new procedures and so on? Do you think it's going to plateau in the future, or do you think it's going to continue accelerating?
I think that the rate is going to be the same or faster because of the breadth of new technologies that are being discovered and the opportunities that these new non-medical technologies have in order to disrupt and dramatically improve the production of surgical surgeons, if you will, or all the subspecialties and disciplines that are taking this route. There's no question in my mind that you need to have a dedicated time to get the basic principles because the new technologies that are coming forward are so much different than what we have been doing in the past. One of the things that I'm getting interested in now and saying, well, geez, I don't know how we're going to go that route. The training of the next 2 generations of surgeons will probably include surgery in space, zero gravity. And let me tell you, having been there and done that, it ain't easy.
So, I mean, can I just bring this back down to earth again? Who should be responsible for the training of new devices, new procedures? Should it be the scientific societies? Should it be, I mean, not just the training, but the credentialing? Should it be the scientific societies or should it be the device manufacturers?
I think the role of the societies is are establishing the methodologies, the policies, and the requirements. The societies can help by having conferences and on insisting like the American College of Surgeons, that there's a review process established by the society for the simulation and training in that particular specialty. I think there's no question about that because to be able to have the society be responsible for individual surgeons is beyond the scope of what they're capable of being able to provide.
Yeah, I agree with you that I think the scientific societies have to lead and own the standards and probably the metrics. But the thing is that the industry is investing so much money in the simulation-based training for the rollout of new devices. Um, I mean, would you agree with me that that virtual reality simulation in endovascular procedures is orders of magnitude superior to what's available in the rest of surgery? And if you do agree, or I mean, why might that be?
Well, I think there is an analogy, for example, between laparoscopic and flexible endoscopy or endovascular. I think those are one group of forms of surgery or procedure that can go together. But beyond those three, they have limitations that are not available through the robotic surgery component of that. The ability in order to integrate the training simulation and the immediate feedback and the relevance to the clinical situation there, I think, is less for those earlier methods of non-invasive surgery. I shouldn't say non-invasive, minimally invasive surgery, than what is going to be available for the future and what is emerging at this time in terms of robotic surgery.
It's been about a quarter of a century now since we completed the VR or at Yale. And I mean, if you look at VR simulation or simulation-based training, it's the highest cited article in the field, and you're the senior author on that. Has surgery taken full advantage of those results?
I don't think it has been able to because of, as I mentioned previously, the time limitations. I mean, we could do so much more if we had a longer training period or we had ways in which we were able to go ahead and devote more time to the simulation and training before the individual would actually go into the operating room and do the see one, do one, teach one aspect of education and training. We have multiple different conflicting problems, not the least of which was the time directive. I recall a couple years ago looking into the American Board of Surgery and what their requirements were for the number of procedures and the breadth of procedures being formed. And the generation that I went through, the average was approximately 1,200 operations were performed by the surgeon that applied for their certification during their period of training, as opposed to about 600 or 700 procedures being performed by the current generation, who's only allowed to be available during the period of time. So I thought my perception is that the time directive was a very important, but it has to stretch out. I mean, you just cannot learn as much as that needs to be known, including the amount of new technologies that are coming out in a time period that the time directive would allow you to do it. And so that's why we now have fellowships afterwards and so forth. Now, I don't know, this may be the answer, but we've been fracturing our house of surgery into smaller and smaller parts. And who knows, like in orthopedics, you can be an orthopedic prosthetic surgeon only doing knees and hips, or you can be a hand surgeon, but you can't be a general orthopedic surgeon anymore, any more than you can be a general surgeon anymore. There's just too much knowledge that has to go into that in order to be at the peak of performance.
So how does a trainee move from a competency-based approach to training to a proficiency-based progression approach? I mean, is that doable, or are you saying it's not doable?
I think it's doable, but it's going to take a longer period of time. And I think to become a surgeon or proceduralist and still preserve the family obligations that a surgeon would have and other non-surgical obligations that they have, that time, you can't expand time. And so you can only do it by taking longer for it, restricting the amount in a day that you're allowed to be able to dedicate, if you will, to your surgical or procedural profession. The total amount of time is going to have to be expanded over years rather than within the 5 or 6 years that we're now seeing that we are taking at a minimum for most surgeons in any of the specialties.
Can I play devil's advocate here for a minute? I mean, maybe what we need is a different approach to training. Like proficiency-based progression, the science demonstrates that we can get somebody to a proficiency benchmark faster, more efficiently, and more homogeneously within that training group than a conventional approach to training. Would that be an acceptable approach to training for you?
Well, my experience with doing simulation, proficiency-based simulation, is that you're not going to be able to compress the time that you can give adequate proficiency-based training to someone and expect them to demonstrate that they have the same level of skills that is going to be necessary than if you were to just go ahead and let them, be available to practice as well as the actual faculty observed system of proficiency based. I don't see how you can do everything that you want to do in the period of time that you have been able to save, if you will, by using the proficiency based. Yes, there are ways that you can do it in a relatively quicker period of time, but I don't think that time, that quicker time, if you will, is enough, a long enough time to get the proficiency-based one well done.
What would you say that if I state that the evidence states the contrary or demonstrates the contrary, that you can get somebody to the proficiency benchmark faster and they perform better in the operating room?
I think that is probably true, but I don't think that if you had a longer period of time than what you did during that training, that you would actually be able to get as much done and the highest quality of assurance that this individual is truly a very skilled person that we would want. I understand that, you go out, you can't know everything, but you learn the basics. And then when you get the basics, then you move on to a higher level of training. But I think that higher level of training, if you don't do it right and you try to get it done too quickly during the fundamentals that you're able to do during the proficiency based, my concern is that you won't get the quality of proficiency based training that you would need to get the full fundamentals so that they can go to the next level and be able to learn, if you will, how to adapt to different situations. If people were all the same, it would be much easier, but people are all different. Every patient, every person is unique. And to that end, to try to say, well, I can go ahead and train somebody in this period of time and they'll need everything that that we will train them everything that they will need for the future of taking care of patients. So that was why earlier generations of surgeons dedicated their lives. That's why they were called residents. They lived in the hospital to learn as much as they can and to be with the patients and get as much expertise as they could. That's not the case anymore. The case is my family comes first, and then if I have enough time, then comes the patient. And also, the money is even worse when it comes to influencing the amount that can be done.
But Rick, the idea of proficiency-based progression wasn't or isn't to train them on every procedure. It's basically to ensure that they have the skills the knowledge to apply the skills, the knowledge to complete the procedure, but a reference approach to the performance of the procedure. It's to making sure that the foundations are built for them to go on and learn the procedure and apply it in the operating room before they go on to more complex procedures. My experience is some of the trainees going through, I won't express the percentage, some of the trainees going through, they struggle with the basics. Proficiency-based progression ensures that the basics are understood and demonstrated before they ever get to a patient. I agree with you in terms of the wisdom application or the wisdom development, and that's more complex, but it has to be built on concrete. It can't be built on sand. The trainee has to demonstrate they know what to do and they can actually do it to a satisfactory and safe performance level.
Well, I am in violent agreement with you on that point. Simply, the premise that it's based upon is that everybody that wants to be a proceduralist or a surgeon can learn in the same period of time. That's not the case. Some people can pick things up quickly. Others are going to keep making mistakes after 10 and 15 different tries. And I can't change the surgeon or the radiologist because there is a wide breadth, if you will, of variability between the individuals. And so I don't know how you can go ahead and say we can squeeze this thing down and put everybody through that and everybody's going to learn it. And then we can let them go out and be certified. I haven't felt when we've been doing that there have been some that we've had to take and continue to do longer, and there are others that learned really quickly and did very well.
How can trainees move from a traditional see one, do one, teach one model of training to a proficiency-based progression approach to training, which we developed when we worked at Yale? How do we go about that?
It is mostly the responsibility of the chairman of surgery to make the arrangements in such that you would be able to have more dedicated time to education and training. The C1 Do One is part of clinical practice, but you can go into the simulation center and do the various devices that they have there. The problem is getting time for the resident or fellow or the young physician to be able to be available, because doing the new proficiency-based progression requires at least 2 to 3 times more in order to be able to adequately do the assessment and have the data that you would need. We've moved into the new era of information and data. And to that point, this happens to be a more significant time consumer than it would be if you would just go and look over the shoulder of your mentor and say, oh, what's this, what's that, and so on and so forth. Because this is a rigorous scientific process, it's going to take more time.
And is that what the chairman of surgery believe? Is that what you believe?
Well, I mean, it's a practical issue. In trying to train these individuals, they rarely come on time and they always leave sometime in the middle when their pager goes off. And so you can't start doing the progression if all of a sudden, they came late and they're going already and you haven't just barely started and you haven't had a chance to complete the assessment. And it doesn't have to necessarily be in one specific time period. You could do it over multiple time periods, but it's just the simple physical fact of getting the learner into the simulation center where you can accurately assess him.
Yeah, but Rick, the published prospective randomized blinded data shows that you can get somebody to proficiency in 1/3 of the time that it takes you to train somebody to proficiency in the normal, repeated practice, traditional approach to training. This has been published now for about a year. I mean, do you think the chairman of surgery who are in charge of the program, do you think they find that an uncomfortable message, or they don't want to hear it?
Well, it's unclear to me how you're going to be able, in very busy residency, to get the individual there to stay there enough time and not. We had an exceptional chairman while we were doing that study, and what ended up happening was that he said, "We're going to take the time." End of story. And we had access to the residents during that period of time. That was set aside. A whole afternoon every day was every Wednesday was set aside for simulation and training. So that's 4 to 5 hours, which is, yeah, we had plenty of time to do that. But when you start saying, he's on call, she has to go and come down to the clinic or come over to the operating room, in the middle of your training, that's not very efficient.
Yeah, but the fact of the matter is they're trainees, they're residents, and part of their function is actually to get trained. And I mean, the hospital knows that. I mean, they're basically getting fairly inexpensive staff,
Right.
but the requirement is for them to be trained.
Correct. And they have to be trained using this methodology in a long period of time, as opposed to multiple tiny in and out, in and out. And that was at least what we had at the simulation center that we were. And then finally the chairman said, okay, Wednesday afternoon from noon until 5, these residents are out of here. They are in the simulation center and are only doing that. So the issue, in my view and in my experience, has been that if your chairman is in agreement, or your chief of general surgery or GYN surgery is in agreement that you can take a longer period of time, single episode, if you will, then that makes it so much easier than if you have to just do little chunks from one time to another.
Yeah, but I mean, Professor Carlos Pellegrini, I mean, in Seattle, I mean, he got the simulation, produced a better trainee for the operating room. They were better prepared. I mean, do you not think more chairmen should be like Carlos?
Well, that would be wonderful. I think it would make it easier to train them if they have dedicated training time. And unfortunately, many residency programs don't have dedicated simulation training time of a long duration, a 3 hour, 4 hour thing. Because in observing an individual for proficiency based, there has to be the setup is there, and then there's this vocabulary back and forth between the resident and the mentor who is watching them and explaining things to them. And that doesn't happen in 20 minutes or half an hour. It takes time to do that. So that was the one area that we had a difficulty until there was a dedicated afternoon every Wednesday for 5 hours. That was the time that residents did have no other obligations.
So, do you think we actually need a different approach to training?
Well, I think the data that you have collected and reviewed repeatedly demonstrates that if you have that time can be decreased to the total amount of time you would have, as opposed to a resident coming in half an hour or 45 minutes and then leaving, coming back again half an hour, 45 minutes and leaving. That type of thing is not conducive to the learning that the proficiency based progression is for. Uh, when we were able to have the chairman of surgery and the residency program director agree to a long period of time where you could go in, you could start, and there's enough time for the dialogue between the mentor, the faculty member, and the learner, it worked out great. And yes, you decrease the total amount of time that you need for the full level of evidence that you want to get. But you can't do it in nickel and dimes. You have to sit down and say, okay, we're going to take the time and we're going to do it this way.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And what's it going to take to get there where the residents are actually given dedicated time to go to the simulation center and train for a period of time? I don't think it will be as long as surgery or medicine thinks it is, but what's it going to take to be able to get to that point where the residents have dedicated simulation training time? What's it going to require?
It requires a commitment from the program director, the residency training program director, and the chairman of the department to agree to using that period of time. I don't know of a way to be able to, just say, well, they're going to go when they can. It may be, okay, Wednesday, you're going to have to, on Saturdays, these residents are going to be at the simulation center with no other obligations. That's one way to do it. Another one is the way it was done at the University of Washington is that individuals will be allowed to be off, quote, off clinical duties for Wednesday afternoons. And so they had a 4 or 5 hour period of time when, okay, it's Wednesday afternoon. I don't have to be called. I don't have to go to the operating room. I don't need to go up to the ward to check on a patient. I have 4 to 5 hours that we can go ahead and get the progression completed.
Okay, so the chairman and the program director, what you're saying it's the leadership should be given from them. I was thinking of a level above. I mean, should an organization like the ACGME should they mandate? Should they direct, or is it the American College of Surgeons or the American Board of Surgery? Should they basically give the leadership to surgery at the hospital level and say, your trainees must be given, your residents must be given this amount of time to go to the simulation center until they train and demonstrate the proficiency benchmark? Would that not be another approach?
Absolutely. I mean, if they have a time for continuation, the only way that we can do that, I think, appropriately, is get a buy-in from the chairman, who has to get the buy-in from the hospital and the medical school and all the rest of that stuff. But the point being is that, you know, they're trying to do too many things in too short of a time. They have got clinic to go to, they've got to make rounds, they've got to go to the operating room, and then they got to go to the simulation center. And that's at the bottom of their list because it doesn't make money, at least not directly. And so the problem I perceive is that until we get a dedicated time period available to the learner, and it could be, everybody comes back on, Tuesday afternoon at 3 o'clock or at 1 o'clock, and you're going to be free. You give your pager to somebody else and let them take call for whatever you were supposed to do. That's how we were able to accomplish it when we did the FRS study. And they came in there and they did it. That's not the whole people. You don't do everybody at once. You do individuals, ones or twos that will come in and do the proficiency-based training.
So proficiency-based progression has considerable amount of quantitative evidence published in peer-reviewed journals, high-impact peer-reviewed journals, and the evidence shows that if you train somebody with proficiency-based progression, they perform 60% better in the operating room. So, given the level of evidence that's currently available, I mean, a systematic review and meta-analysis is level 1A scientific evidence. So, given that level of evidence, why do you think a proficiency-based progression approach has not gotten more traction than it actually has? What's your opinion?
Yeah, it's fundamentally what I have just indicated that, you know, they must have had and figured it out for themselves that there has to be a dedicated period of time. I think that was the one thing that was the biggest problem that we had when we first transitioned from see one, do one, teach one to proficiency-based progression. It was you have somebody and you have them for a long time. I mean, you can't do formative feedback in 2 minutes. I mean, this is not the way you train people. You have to have discussions. There's got to be give and take on both the learner and the faculty side. So that was what the beauty of the progressive training was that there was a lot of give and take, information sharing back and forth. See one, do one, teach one is, a visual experience during an operation. And, you don't want to interfere with the surgeon while he's in the middle of a critical part of the surgery and so forth. That's what I think the beauty of it is. If it's done properly with time for the interaction between the learner and the faculty member, then it works really good. And well, can you do it in small bunches? Well, I guess so. You can go ahead and train for 15 minutes on one part of this and then let them go away and come back and start a different part of it. That could be another method that you would do it. But, the beauty of proficiency-based progression is what you end up doing is you have an excellent rapport between learner and faculty. The formative feedback is critical to that. And you're able to go ahead and say, okay, you made a mistake, start all over and let's go again and see if you can make it all the way through. If where you made the mistake, you do it this way instead. That is the foundation in my mind of what the proficiency-based progression is. It's because you can go and you can let them try as hard as they can to accomplish a task. And if they don't, somewhere along the line, the weakest link in the chain, if you will, you could say, stop, this is what you did wrong, go back to the beginning. This time when you come to this part, you do it this way. That's what proficiency-based progression, to me, from having done a fair number of the individuals training that way, that was the beauty of it. And they can get a concept that in order to do an operation properly, this is the entire sequence you have to go through to get to the end with a good outcome. And so coming these nickel and dime time periods, kind of breaking everything up, and they don't have a global perspective of what that particular procedure needed to be. It works fine for skills based only, you know, tying knots and picking up beans and putting them in cups and that kind of stuff. Yeah, well, you can do that in short steps, but that's not surgery. That's a task, a tiny part of the entire perspective from operating on an individual.
So, what in your experience makes for an effective simulation?
Well, precisely the way that proficiency-based progression was designed. From my perspective, it was you do simple tasks first until you're proficient in a small task. Then you do larger tasks, which require many of the smaller steps before until you learn that. And then you go again and you say, okay, now this is a simple procedure. And you go ahead and through all the steps, and they have to do everything perfectly without making mistakes. And then fine, okay, now you can do something simple. Now we're going to do something difficult from beginning to end. And they should be able to remember the sequence that they need to do things in addition to what the individual tasks are. And hopefully by period of time, they have been able to automate certain parts, like tying a knot or doing an anastomosis. They don't have to think about it. It's okay, well, it's time to, we cut out this piece of bowel. We're going to do an anastomosis, and it's going to be automatic. It's not going to be, oh, no, do I do this? Do I do that? They have done it so many times, and they've done it without mistakes that they will have learned that. So I think that that's probably the key in actually implementing the proficiency-based program. That's what the name implies, progression.
Yeah. I mean, one of the core aspects of proficiency-based progression is the objective assessment of performance. Uh, is AI now or in the near future, do you think it's able to reliably and validly assess intraoperative surgical performance in real time?
At this point in time, the level is it's still learning.
Yeah.
All right. Simple tasks, yes, they could probably do that quite well. Their image recognition is good, and there's nothing complicated, if you will, about tying a knot or, well, actually, there is, or doing an anastomosis or something like that. There are sequences that can be reviewed by the AI program and be able to be learned. It has to go through a learning process. Of course, we don't know what that is, and neither do the AI people that are programming it. They have no idea how their programs work, but they work. So, they learn like people learn.
Yeah, I mean, I think that AI will get there, but not at the minute. I mean, the instrument path length, jaw movement, and stuff like that. I think these are probably like letters of an alphabet. You can put them together at some point to assess performance, but they can't at the minute. I don't. Well, I think the AI movement would like to sell us the idea that they can objectively assess performance. But what they're objectively assessing are subcomponents. I mean, it's like the suturing and knot tying. I mean, like virtual reality simulation. I mean, it's still not. It still can't simulate well the physics of suturing and knot tying the process. And I think AI is at a similar point. Okay, going to change tack slightly. So, what changes would you like to see in procedure-based medicine training in medicine in the near or very near future?
I think we need to somehow convince, I don't know so much as the societies, but we've got to convince people, the physicians, whatever echelon they're at, that this is the new way that needs to be done. It's the scientific way. It is not an alternative way, like see one, do one, teach one is, or whatever. So, and just doing cadavers. You need more than that, if you will. And so we've got to convince them that this particular methodology will be able to get them to a level of proficiency. And I think one of the key parts that we don't really see with see one, do one, teach one, or these other methods is that there is a specific benchmark that they know they must reach. And that is what they have to do. There is a well defined, unambiguous outcome, and they don't get out of the lab until they do that outcome without a mistake. That's, I think, the power of proficiency based progression. You see one, do one, teach one. Maybe you can ask the faculty member as you look over their shoulder, "Oh, what did you do? Or is that important?" But that's different from actually physically doing it yourself. And that's what this, once again, another strength of the proficiency based training. They're actually doing what they what they're supposed to do to achieve an outcome, and that outcome has already been established by uh, surgeons who have done this repeatedly, hundreds and thousands of times, and this is the outcome. And so that's what you're supposed to do because we now have a benchmark to see whether or not you've been able to do that.
So, why do you think we failed to convince the surgical medical establishment that this is a better approach to training? Because the data is there. I mean, I had a colleague who works for one of the medical device manufacturers. Uh, he said to me, he says, Tony, PVP, this is not a matter of evidence. He says, for some reason, the medical establishment doesn't seem to get or doesn't seem to want to get the fact that the PVP is a more efficient and a more effective approach to training. So, what do you think we've missed? What have we not done that we should have done?
Well, I think it's the issue of it's not a patient. That's what the goal is, to save a patient. It's not, the goal is not, in their mind, is not just to tie a knot. The goal is to save a patient. And sure, yeah, we've got various ways that we can do maybe once a week, and you're expected in a few hours only to be able to accomplish and then move on to your observation of the operative procedure, and then maybe be assisted by the faculty member as you try to do it with the faculty member across from you and so forth. So trying to, once again, I keep going back to the issue of time. Education is not time in the medical profession. They don't have time to do it. They're so busy with all the other requirements that they have related directly to patient care. I don't know how we can get people to understand the importance of patient care in the training, as opposed to, oh, well, they're just going into the simulation lab. That has nothing to do with my patients. There is that, I think, hurdle that we have to get over.
Yeah, but the evidence shows that trainees that go through a proficiency-based progression approach to training, they perform better in the operating room, and the small number of studies that actually exist show that they actually have better outcomes on patients, not on a simulation.
Right. But once again, that means that there is a period of time before the individual gets to a point that they can give better outcomes. And they're not willing to take that preliminary time of training to make sure that they can do the little things correctly and to be able to do it. And you could measure their outcomes and determine that they are ready. I mean, there's nothing ready about going to see one, do one, teach one method. There's nothing scientific there. It's all the opinion of whoever the observer is. Maybe it's the faculty member, maybe it's somebody else. And it's their opinion that what they did was right and they got to the outcome. It might not be the best outcome, but it's an outcome. And what you want to do is to be able to make a way to evaluate whether or not, when an individual starts doing something, that they're highly likely to get an outcome that an experienced surgeon would do. You can't get that right away, but anyhow, they can get pretty close to it. And that's what I think proficiency-based training is able to do. It's able to say, look, I've watched him. He's done this, this, this. We've graded him. He's made the proficiency-based benchmarks each time. And I think he's ready. I mean, there's evidence that they're ready. Nowadays, evidence that they're ready with see one, do one, teach one is, well, he came in and he watched me, and then I assisted him, and then I think he's ready to go. That's what see one, do one, teach one is.
But I mean, Rick, that sounds to me like there's a heavy emphasis on service commitment rather than training. The whole point of being a resident is that they're in training, they're a surgeon in training, they're a cardiologist in training. And it seems to be that that's pushed to the absolute periphery, if even considered at all.
Correct. That's a very example of what the problem is.
Yeah.
Because when somebody comes and the system, if you want to say, expects them to be able to take care of patients right away, well, they got to be trained, sure. And then the next thing you know, they are saying, wait, you can't. You've got to go to clinic. There's somebody down in the clinic. I want you in the operating room. Okay, I'll be in the operating room and you'll be able to learn. But, my observation has been that it's a very difficult task for the faculty members to accept that these people are going to make mistakes until they're actually trained well. And I can train them, but why do I need proficiency-based training? Because I'm so good, I can train them, and we don't need that. So we have problems, I think, with accepting at the faculty level as well as the learner level that
Yeah, but
that we want to do this scientifically.
well, scientifically, I would say we want to do it properly. It just so happens that scientifically gives you the evidence to say
Yep.
when something's ready to go to a patient. Okay, so the scientific evidence about a proficiency-based progression approach to training is robust, and there's quite a bit of it, all the way up to level 1A evidence. Do you think that approach is only useful for residents, or do you think it's also useful for consultants and attendings learning to use new devices, learning to do new procedures, learning to use new technologies such as robotics?
I think it's relative to the experience of the private practitioner, if you will, as how much they are familiar with the procedure and how much they are familiar with the new instrument. And it's going to take, like for robotic surgery, it took a fair amount of time for them to learn. Laparoscopic surgery was almost a nightmare because every time you went up, the instrument went down. So that took a lot of learning. So I think it has to do with the individual that's being trained as much as it is about um, whether or not they're proficient.
But I mean, do you not think it'd be better? I mean, for example, with robots or new cardiovascular devices, do you not think even for an experienced practitioner, it's better to ensure in the skills lab on a simulator that they actually can use the device safely to a perform quantitatively defined performance level before they ever get to the patient?
I would support that view 100%. There's no question at all that there needs to be that time, but there are a lot of roadblocks on the way to getting there, not the least of which is the ego of the faculty members that's supposed to be doing the training. You know, here is a very experienced surgeon in 3,000 of these operations, and sometimes the patience isn't there. And so they are so used to this of doing it one way. And their opinion is that I've done 1,000 of these things. Well, you know, he doesn't know what he's doing, that type of thing. That they have the experience, and they can't, it's very difficult for them to reach back into the memory and say, oh boy, I had a hard time learning that or something. You know, if you've done these many and you want to get through it, you got other things that you need to do, and you know how to do this operation, you do it really quickly, and that's it, and you're out of there. But on the other hand, if you've got a resident that's in there, you've got to have the mindset that this guy's going to make or this girl's going to make a bunch of mistakes along the way. And my job now is not to leave them and get my work done, but rather my work now is making sure that they learn. We don't have, I think, that many of our surgeons that are really good trainers. I'm not, I'm probably just the same. It's not like, I understand. But the problem is that we don't have enough doctors for the number of patients that are available. And the emphasis now has moved a bit too much to the, well, we've got to get more patients through in a shorter period of time so we can make more money. It's not as much about the patients as it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. Now it's how many people can you get through? You know, you've got the CEO of the hospital on the back of the chairman of surgery. Now, this chairman of surgery has got to be a foil, if you will, for the resident that is going to try to learn, and it's going to take longer for them to do the operative procedure initially. And if the surgeon is taking the time trying to train somebody, what does that mean? That means that there's going to be less patients going through, and it means it's less money for the hospital, and chairman's going to have them all over their back.
Yeah. So you've been doing this a long time, Rick. I mean, you were talking about simulation and developing simulations in the 1990s.
Mhm.
Uh, do you think the leaders in surgery and procedure-based medicine are open and receptive to the idea of a new quality assured and scientific approach to training? I mean, do you think? I mean, you hang out with these individuals. Are they open to the idea, or do you think they're very
Oh,
closed?
I think they're open to it, but they're um, overwhelmed by the other things that have blossomed within healthcare. We have done things that are so different from the general conduct, if you will, of the way you have a patient physician relationship. And I mean, I was appalled by watching the quote hospitalist coming in, seeing my wife, and spending maybe 20 minutes of which 5 minutes of it was talking to her, and the rest of it was the computer, because they also have to put the data in. And I was disappointed also when one of the hospitalists said, "Well, where's our family practitioner?" And he said, "But it doesn't matter. The patient belongs to the hospital room, not to the doctor." Very interesting. Very interesting. So, yeah, once again, and this was one of the most expensive community hospitals where my wife was in the hospital. And so I'm looking at this, and they may make some the CEOs may make some remarks relative to, oh, it's only about patient care and so on and so forth. But yeah, they've got investors that they've got to go ahead and be responsible for, and many other people that they have to be responsible for that has nothing to do with patient care, but has to do with hospitalization. And like every CEO, they've got many things to do, and so they push that down to the doctor, and do this, do that, do this, do that, because I need that information from the people over here that have nothing to do, if you will, with the patient care. There's the inventory people, and there's distribution people, and that they're 2 or 3 steps removed from the patient care, but they have jobs that they need to do so that the boss who's coordinating everything will be able to have that data. So that was kind of the feeling I had about what we've seen happen. And to a certain extent, they've made physicians' life better, but they've made doctor-patient relationships worse with the a work time directive that started in England and then came to the United States.
So, I mean, basically, what you're concluding is that the process or the of looking after patients has become more like a business, a profit making business, rather than simply about healthcare.
Well, absolutely. The pressure from the top is investors, and make sure we have enough money and make sure we do all these regulations that are out there. Make sure that you've got your ICD-9 code accurate so that I can make sure that we have accurate reimbursement so we make enough money to pay our investors. This is just another industry, if you will, that has many investors requiring them. I
Yeah,
will tell
I think that's not just your concern, Rick. I think that's
you.
the concern of a lot of the leadership in medicine, that medicine in the United States has become much too profit oriented rather than patient care oriented.
When I was in private practice for a short time, uh, and it was December, and the faculty CEO meeting comes every December, and he said, "All right, well, now only emergencies from now until the end of the year." And I said, "But I've got a dozen patients scheduled." So, well, they're going to have to be canceled, be done later sometime. And we said, "Well, what's the problem?" And he says, "Well, let me bring my financial people here." And the financial people came in and said, "Okay, well, you guys don't understand how important it is that we have investors. And if we have $140 million investment in our community hospital, and if we don't make it," and I said, "Well, how much are they getting?" And he says, 20%. We have to give 20% profit to the investors, or else they will leave take their money and go to another hospital that will. And so the point being is that, and this was in the 80s and the 90s when the focus finalized that it's an industry, it's a profit-making industry, if you will, healthcare is. And yeah, we have a bunch of patients, but we got investors that we've got to pay off, and therefore, if you don't pay the investors, the hospital goes down. So I was great when I went back into the military. I didn't want to do that. It was it was a frightening thing, saying that you can't operate on any patients that you've got scheduled because we've got to get money enough for our investors.
Okay. Listen, thanks, Rick. Appreciate it.